Hey everyone, and welcome to WDIM News, my weekly podcast where I talk about sci-fi stuff and some other stuff. My name is Eric. Thank you very much for joining me today on a huge podcast. I have a bunch of stuff to talk about, including the first episode of the highly anticipated second season of Star Trek Strange New Worlds titled The Broken Circle. After reviewing that, I also want to talk about the first trailer for the upcoming Babylon 5 film, The Road Home, that was released last week. Speaking of things that were just released, the sixth season of Black Mirror, as well as the Flash film, were also just released last week, so I want to do a non-spoiler and a spoiler breakdown of both in case you are thinking about seeing them or you have seen them already. Then I'm going to end the podcast with a very important update about my channel and what type of content I will be creating moving forward. If you are someone who has been watching my channel for a while, you definitely want to stay until the end because this is the biggest change that I've made since starting What Did I Miss as a YouTube channel almost 3 years ago. But before I get into all that, I just want to remind you to leave a like on this video to help it get out to more people. Also, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so that YouTube lets you know when my new videos come out. These things are free for you, but help my channel out more than anything else. So alright, first let's talk about the first episode of the second season of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. If you're like me, you've been waiting for this for a while. I really liked the first season of Strange New Worlds, so I was hoping that we would keep the momentum going for the second season. And I think that so far we have. I've read a few reviews about the first episode that stated it was underwhelming. You know, I think that in Star Trek, we've had a lot of serialized Star Trek lately. And when you have a serialized story, you really got to have that first episode that knocks the ball out of the park right away. And you always get a lot of action right away and you're thrown right into something and you're already pontificating about, what's going to happen this season. And Strange New Worlds isn't that kind of show. We don't really have one overarching story that we'll be following this season or we were last season. We do have these stories that we touch on here and there. And I'm also going to touch on those stories when I discuss this episode. But I do think that it was a good episode. It starts the season out with some good momentum. But all in all, I think it was a good start and it did a lot of good world building. We don't know a lot about the Klingon War. And it looks like we are going to learn more about it in this season or maybe even going forward. And that's really an interesting part of the history of Starfleet that we don't know too much about. This episode, though, to me, and I mentioned this in my breakdown, felt like a prequel to the film Star Trek: The Undiscovered Country. That Cold War plotline was very prevalent for the time that the movie was released, but I think it kind of came out of left field a little bit. I mean, I know Admiral Cartwright was in the film before The Undiscovered Country, but for him to kind of play this Cold War villain, and, and then they, of course, introduced General Chang in the film as these, people that should be working against each other, but now they're working behind the scenes to restart a war between the Klingons and the Federation. And with this episode, it feels like we're filling in the blanks a little bit about how this attempted coup came to be. And I also thought it was interesting that they make it a point to say that this started from a place where people wanted to make money, that somebody was trying to profit off the war. When we get to the film Star Trek: The Undiscovered Country, I don't think General Chang and Admiral Cartwright are really concentrated on money. They're true believers, and I think in a lot of these things, I don't want to get too political here, but in a lot of these things, people are lied to at the beginning of it, and then they go on and become these true believers. And you see that probably happened to General Chang and Admiral Cartwright, that they were probably lied to by someone involved in this plot line, and then they become true believers in this cause, and we almost get, another war between the Klingons and the Federation. So I thought that was very smart. I really like it when Star Trek not only references itself, but kind of talks about, what's going on in the world, not just in America, but I think, you could say in the world too, where political ideologies become confused because you don't really know where they start. Sometimes they don't start from a good place. And I mean that from all sides. I'm not taking any sides, in this conversation. I'm saying that there are bad players in every aspect of the political realm. And I think that this episode kind of touches on that. I also think this episode showed us that Pike will not be as big a character this season. I know Akiva Goldsman and other people that have worked on Strange New Worlds have said that Captain Pike was so centric to the story in the first season, and most of the episodes were about him or were following him, that this season would not be like that. And, we get the first episode and really he's hardly in it. He's off the ship just as soon as he can be. And he's really only in the first act, or only really does something in the first act. So I thought that that was pretty interesting and kind of sets the tone. Like I said, this episode sets the tone in a lot of ways for this season, and this is one of those ways. Another one of those ways is that I think we're going to be seeing a lot more, of course, of the other characters, and one in particular is Laan Noonien Singh, and I really liked her at the forefront. I think Christina Chong, in a very short amount of time, has a very good grasp of who this character is. I really understand her. I really can see that she is a very capable officer. She definitely has a chip on her shoulder, but it's driving her, and it makes her a lot of ways. It makes her a good crew member, but probably makes her a bad friend in other ways. But I'm really interested about her character, and I want to know more about her. And this episode was a good kind of introduction to that. She was off the Enterprise, of course, but she was still in the last episode last season. They very smartly worked her back in under Kirk. I've talked before about how this season it also looks like her and Kirk are going to be spending some time together, which is crazy in its own right. If you think about how the Noonien Singh thing works out with her ancestor Khan turning out to be Kirk's greatest adversaries. I also thought that Carol Kane as Pelia was a really good addition to the cast. I think she really developed her own kind of character here with the help of the writers and the creators of Strange New Worlds, of course. But I see her as like an individualistic character. I can't say like, oh, she's just like Pulaski or she's just like Worf, or something like that. I can't immediately like break out an archetype for her. At first, she seemed very straight laced, and then all of a sudden, she's helping the crew steal the Enterprise. I thought that was really cool. I like that she's a race of alien that we know nothing about. So there's that to learn about her. And the fact that she is like a near immortal race, it seems, means that she probably won't get killed off, which I've stated, like, I really hope they don't keep killing off characters to get to the characters that we know on the Enterprise in the original series, because I think that'll kind of put a stain on those characters if you have to remember like how many people died just so, Scotty could be engineer. We already know that Hemmer died. To think that like Pelia will also die too, like how many are they going to kill off? It kind of gets kind of morbid. But I really thought that she was funny. I like her as an actress. She's been in a ton of things that I like The Princess Bride, Addams Family. And another thing that's cool about her casting that I thought about after I did my breakdown video was that she was on Taxi and she won Emmy Awards and stuff. Christopher Lloyd was also on Taxi, and of course, he was in a Star Trek film. He starred in that, it seems, right after he was on Taxi, so there's no real crossover there unless, they kept up as friends and maybe he brought up, a good experience he had on Star Trek, and then Carol Kane was like, maybe I should do Star Trek one day. That would be an interesting story to hear maybe from her or Christopher Lloyd in the future, but I thought about that later. There's like a weird Taxi connection. I thought also another part of this episode that I liked was that it was a really smart way to get Spock in charge of the ship by getting not only Pike, but number one and Laan off the ship. All those officers would have been captain in front of Spock. And because of all these, occurrences, now Spock is captain for the first time. I thought that was really smart. And maybe if they didn't even do it on purpose, it was a good way to take advantage of that, that, oh, well, Laan's off doing this and number one's arrested and Pike's going to help her. So now we can tell a story about Spock's first time in charge of the Enterprise. I thought that was really smart, and with that, we learned that Spock shows loyalty before, duty, basically, that he's willing to steal the Enterprise to help Laan. And this really sets up his motivations in the original series episode, The Menagerie, when he also steals the Enterprise, and that time to help Pike. This episode, we didn't really find out how Pike will respond to Spock stealing the Enterprise. I could see him going both ways, like either being really mad or like totally being like cool with it. He'll probably be something like how Admiral April was, like admonishing him at first and then being like, yeah, I get it. Like you have to back up your crew. But it is kind of interesting. Like I said, this episode sets up bigger things down the line. And in a small way, I think by Spock stealing the Enterprise in this episode, we see that, yeah, he's willing to do this. And he's going to do this later for Christopher Pike in that episode of the original series. So another way that this episode of Strange New Worlds is a good episode of Star Trek. Also in this episode, it kind of gave Nurse Chapel and Dr. Mbenga and maybe even Ortegas a little bit a kind of edge, knowing that we know that they served in the Klingon War. The doctor stated something about like 100 million Federation citizens died during the war and they lost 1/3 of the fleet. I think the war only lasted about a year. So that's pretty crazy. I mean, that's a lot of battles to lose those many people and that many ships. For kind of comparison, I believe that 91 million Federation citizens died in the Dominion War. I don't know how many ships. If I'm wrong, I'm sure I'm going to get blown up in the comments, but I found somewhere where it stated that 91 Federation citizens died in the 2 years of the Dominion War. And again, the Klingon War was only 1 year, and 100 million Federation citizens died. So it kind of makes the Klingon War look at least on par with the Dominion War, or maybe even a little more vicious, which is kind of crazy. I don't know if we ever had that perspective before. We just knew it was real bad. And because of that, I kind of think that Dr. Mbenga may not like Klingons very much. He seemed, maybe enthused is not the right word to use, but he did not have a problem with messing up some Klingons and doing some drugs to do it, you know? And that kind of goes against the Hippocratic Oath, which he took and Nurse Chapel took. And yeah, they pretty much had no problem just like forgetting that for a few seconds and whooping on some Klingons. Those are those pesky Federation rules that you only sometimes apply to some people. But having said that, that whole scene may actually end up helping Una Chin-Riley's case, because if Dr. Mbenga and Nurse Chapel are using something that they used during the Klingon War, they probably got it from Starfleet. So if they could prove that Starfleet was still doing some kind of genetic research or genetic engineering to enhance their soldiers during the Klingon War, then they can't really kick out number one for being a genetically modified race when they're doing the same things themselves. So they might do that, like in one of those, well, we don't want this to get public, so we'll just let number one stay on the Enterprise and keep quiet about it, and we won't say anything about these drugs that we had our citizens use during the war. So that could be something that develops in the next episode, I kind of thought. But it was interesting to get that perspective on the Klingon War. And I know I'm beating a dead horse here, but this is another way that this episode sets up a bigger world. Now we know more about the Klingon War. We know that Nurse Chapel and Dr. Mbenga definitely have some scars from that. With Ortegas, it's kind of hard to see if she has any scars because she's always so upbeat, but she definitely has some experience in the war. She said, and she did say something about knowing when to fight and not when to fight, or knowing when to hide or not to hide, or something like that. I don't remember exactly, but it's something along those lines. So she definitely has some scars as well. So it'll be interesting to hear more about those and maybe seeing some through a flashback. And then the last thing I really want to touch on are the look of the Klingons. This kind of vexed me at first because I don't like when stories just ignore canon. You know, you signed up to write episodes and write stories for Star Trek. So there's a responsibility there. You know, there's a bigger world, there's universes that you have to adhere to, and some rules and some events that you have to touch on. And this episode, to me, kind of made it seem like we're just not going to worry about the Klingons looking like humans, and we're just going to go straight into the TNG era look of the Klingons. Because on Discovery, they definitely look different. I mean, they didn't have hair for one thing, but they definitely look different. I mean, all the design of the Klingons looked a lot different than they did from the TNG era, from the movies. And I'm not clowning the J.J. Abrams movies, of course, which had their own look, and the look of the Klingons in this episode. So at first, I was not very happy, with kind of their choice there. But I read an article on the website trekmovie.com, which I have praised before on this channel. You should definitely check out that website if you have not yet. And they did an interview with the showrunners of Strange New Worlds, and he said specifically that they are stressing story over canon with their plot lines and how they're going to do their episodes, which wasn't, which I don't love to hear. You know, like I said, like if you sign on to do Star Trek, you can't like ignore big things. And the series Star Trek Enterprise really gives them an out. They started the Klingon augment virus plotline that they could have used in this episode or on Strange New Worlds. Now, Akiva Goldsman in that same interview did state that he is open to doing like augment virus style storylines, but it's obvious that the Klingon people will not all look like humans. He said that he's using the style that he chose because it's what fans have responded to over the years. So I get that, you know, you want to respond to the bigger fan base, and probably a lot of people don't even care or don't even know about, you know, what the Klingons look like before the movies. Another thing that Akiva Goldsman said was a lot of times when they're thinking up the story that they're going to do on Strange New Worlds, they think, what would the creators of the original series do if they were creating the show right now and not when they were? In that case, he was specifically talking about the Gorn, I think, but I think the same thing holds true here, that, if there was an original series show going on right now, or it was out, 10 years ago or whatever, even 20 years ago, they would have had Klingons that looked like the Klingons that we know from the TNG era and from the movies and those. So I guess that's what we're going to see. Maybe we'll see a certain group of Klingons that look like the Klingons that we know from the original series. But again, not a huge fan of that. I wish they would kind of go right at canon. A lot of these other things are going right at. With the Gorn, they're going right at them. Klingon War going right at them. The Romulans to a certain extent going right at it. So I'm surprised that they're just like, we're not going to care about the way Klingons look, and we're just going to respond to what the fans like, and we're going to make them look like they did in the TNG era. Thinking about how they look, I like the way they look. Okay, I can honestly say I like the way the Klingons look. I don't like the choice to forget about canon. So that's kind of, I'll get off my soapbox now. You're probably tired of hearing about it, but let me know if you agree with me though, or if you agree with Akiva Goldsman and it should just be about story over canon. And then also, I would be remiss if I did not mention the very nice dedication to Nichelle Nichols at the end of the episode. I feel like Star Trek has always been good about that. When someone passes away, they recognize them in some way in a future, project. I'm sure somebody's going to hit me up in the comments right now about like the one or two times that they didn't do that. I'm sorry, I don't remember it. But the few that I remember, like with Leonard Nimoy specifically, I think that the creators of Star Trek were very respectful with that. And, I liked it. And I liked to see something about Nichelle Nichols in this episode. So I thought that was very cool. So kudos to them. And then finally, if you want to know more about my feelings about this episode, I did do a breakdown video. I released it on Friday. I will pin it in the description of this video. So definitely check that out if you want to see all the Easter eggs. But let me know, what did you think of this episode? Did you think it was slow? Did you think it kind of set up a bigger universe like I was talking about? What were your feelings when you were done with the episode? And are you still excited for the rest of the season? All right, so next let's talk about that new trailer from Babylon 5 for their new movie, The Road Home. It was about a 2-minute trailer that actually I think showed a lot about the movie. The first thing that I was worried about was the animation style, and I liked it. It kind of reminds me of the late 2000s, like comic book animated films for adults. I don't mean, the weird ones. I mean like, the DC Marvel ones. And it kind of reminds me of that same style. There have been some recent animated series too, based around comic books that, again, it kind of looks pseudo-realistic. I would kind of call it that. But I could definitely pick out who all the characters were, and it wasn't hard for me to see, who was this and who was that. From the details that depicted in the trailer and the events shown on the trailer, the film will take place 2 years after winning the Shadow War, which I think chronologically is very soon after the ending of the original series. There were a string of films that were released after the end of the series. I don't know if The Road Home will occur before or after those. A character in the trailer did state that the film will take place 2 years after winning the Shadow War. And it looks like the plot is about Captain Sheridan leaving Babylon 5 to visit Minbar and giving a speech there. And after giving the speech, he begins traveling through time and to different dimensions. It's because some type of device that's set off. And we see that he visits many different timelines and he goes into the past and even the future. With at least one timeline he visits is where they lost the Shadow War. Zathras is narrating and may play Sheridan's guide through this thing. He has a couple of funny lines in the trailer. There's also a scene with Sheridan and Sinclair on Babylon 5 as it is being destroyed. And the trailer ends with a character that could be Jakar, but he looks like he's from another dimension. And then the trailer pretty much ends. I thought it was a pretty cool trailer. Again, I think it did show kind of the basis of the movie. We heard many of the returning cast. That would be Bruce Boxleitner as John Sheridan, Claudia Christian as Susan Ivanova, Peter Jurassic as Londo Malari, Bill Mummy as Lanier, Tracy Scoggins as Elizabeth Lockley, and Patricia Tallman as Lita Alexander. The rest of the characters will be voiced by new actors. This film will be released on August 15th, 2023 on digital on demand and DVD. So this won't be released initially on Max. It will be released on digital on demand, which is like when you have to pay specifically for a movie on your cable system. It won't be released in theaters, unfortunately, but maybe some theaters will have like a one-night showing or something. But all in all, I thought that this was a good trailer and really sets up the movie well. It gets me excited about it. Like I said, I think all the characters in the animation style still look like they're live-action characters, so it won't be hard for you to pick out. The voices that I did hear did sound like the actors that I remember. I'm of course talking about the new voice actors. So like I said, all in all, I thought it was a good trailer and got me excited for the movie. I will put a link to the trailer in the description of this video if you want to check it out. And let me know in the comments, what do you think about the trailer? Do you like the animation style? Does it kind of take you out of it? Does it make you not want to watch the movie? Or do you not care? And are you just excited for another Babylon 5 film? Let me know in the comments below. All right, so next I'm going to talk about Black Mirror Season 6. Now for this, I'm going to go through non-spoilers and then spoilers. So if you haven't watched the 6th season of Black Mirror yet, or you've just watched a couple episodes and are not all the way caught up, I will have time codes below in the description so you can kind of jump around and you won't have anything spoiled. So first I'm going to give like a non-spoiler review, and then before I go into my spoilers, I will give you a warning so you can click around. So the first thing I will say is I like this season quite a bit. I've seen some reviews that are one way and the other on this season, but all in all, I thought it was a good season. It has been 4 years since the last season was released, season 5, and I definitely felt that, like kind of when this first trailer was released, I was like, oh yeah, Black Mirror exists. I completely forgot about that series that I actually liked a lot, but since it hasn't been out for so long, I really forgot about it. Another thing that I thought was cool about the season was from the trailer, I was most excited about one episode in particular, and it turned out that that was the episode I liked the least out of the 5. I will go into which one was which during spoilers, but Black Mirror is good at a lot of things. And one of the things it's good at is subverting audience expectation. And they definitely did that more than once with this season, specifically in this case where, like I said, one episode I thought I was going to like a lot just from the scenes in the trailer. And then at the end, there were definitely episodes that I like more than that. And I just love the anthology style. I wish there were more series like this. I totally can understand the feel of this series without every episode being the same, with the same actors or following the same, kind of motif or anything like that, the same format. I love this. I love kind of the Twilight Zone kind of style of anthology shows. And I'm really happy that they've kept doing this. And they really kind of expanded on it, I think, this season. And I'm all for it. I liked how they did that. Another note that I have that I really liked about the season is how they took aim specifically at streaming media like Netflix itself and how the content shapes culture. A lot of these services would just take the money and run. But I think that Netflix is doing something with this series and making a comment about not just streaming media, but they themselves kind of put it out there like, this is what we do sometimes and we don't like it. And you should be aware of this and probably not care about this stuff that much. And, they've kind of touched on media before, definitely. Last season had an episode with Miley Cyrus that really touched on it. But I really like, especially in the first 2 episodes of this season, and it's not really a spoiler, to say that they really look at what Netflix and streaming media as a whole has done to culture in a couple of different ways. And it's really smart. It's really makes you think in different ways completely, and I really like that. It's another good thing that Black Mirror does. It's kind of very meta, but this is just being over meta, they're literally talking about themselves. There's a streaming service in one of these episodes that looks just like Netflix, that's laid out exactly the same way. I mean, it's not Netflix. They do diverge, definitely. They're making fun of themselves. I mean, they're definitely talking about themselves. I thought it was pretty cool to do this in this kind of culture where companies are way more concentrated on making money, and if something's popular, just keep doing it, no matter if it's, bashing a kid over the head. If that's popular, just keep putting it on TV and keep doing it over and over again. So I think that it's very smart that they did that in this season. I really like that. And I can say that after 6 seasons, Black Mirror can still shock you and make you think. Sometimes it makes you think about things or see things in a way from a certain perspective that you're not even aware of, like going into the episode, just because of where you live or, what kind of person you are, what, culture you're in. You don't see what's going on in the rest of your country or the rest of the world. And you start watching this episode and you think it's going to be about this one thing. And then they start talking about this other thing. And you're like, wow, I never really thought about it like that. Black Mirror is great with that. And they definitely do that a couple of times, I think, this season. And they definitely shock you. One episode in particular has an ending that is very shocking, even though you can kind of see where it's going, I think. And I'll talk about that in spoilers. But there's always one episode that kind of stays with you where you turn off the episode and you're like, I might not watch this for a couple more hours. I might just go walk around and play with my dog or my kids, or just do something, play a video game for a little bit. Just kind of depress a little bit. After that episode, there's definitely at least one episode of Black Mirror that hits you like that, and they can do it again 6 seasons later, and it's a different way. It's definitely a different way, and it's it's kind of a staple of this series, and I think they were successful of it in this season. And I also liked that within these episodes, not everything is in the future. Usually in a Black Mirror episode, it's in the very near future, and the technology is very familiar. There's 3 episodes in this season. One takes place in 1969, one takes place in 1979, and one takes place, I believe, in 2004. And they're all in kind of alternate pasts that have different technology and stuff like that. But the style that they're shot in is very much akin to that era. I love that. I thought that was so cool. The aesthetic was really cool, and I like that it's different from past seasons. Like, we're not always in what looks like where we are right now, or maybe like the near to not too distant future. I really hope they continue, doing that. If they continue making more of these, I don't know if they're going to make more Black Mirror, but hopefully this is popular enough that they do. It's an anthology series, so it's probably in one way very difficult, in one way very easy to pull off, because you don't have to have this huge cast on hand to kind of sign all these contracts and stuff. But still, when you get to go ahead to do a new season, you better know who you're going to cast and all this kind of stuff, because you have to build something from the ground up every season, and really every episode, not just every season. But I really like that those episodes were, kind of set in the past. I really thought that was cool. And I also like that there were less tropes that were tied to technology. Black Mirror kind of through the years has always had something to do with technology in virtually every episode. And this season is not like that. One episode in particular, it calls it out very plainly by stating, this episode is Red Mirror Presents, and it's really more of a horror episode than having anything to do with technology. But I think another episode, it's very little to do with technology. Really just the last shot kind of brings technology back into the storyline of the episode. But I'm fine with that. I love the Twilight Zone and Tales from the Dark Side, Tales from the Crypt. I was a huge fan of all that stuff. So I am fine with them doing more horror stuff and less technology stuff. Keep doing that. I think it's cool. I think you definitely don't want to completely go away with that, and maybe keep with the Red Mirror stuff. And when you're going to do horror stuff, say, Red Mirror Presents, but still do the technology stuff. But I'm fine with, if you want to do one episode or 2 episodes out of 5 that are just strictly horror, I'm all about that. And then the last non-spoiler thing I'm going to talk about are the performances. Black Mirror usually has some great performances, and this season is no different. The ones that I'm going to point out in particular are Annie Murphy, who stars in the first one, Joan is Awful. She's awesome. The episode is called Joan is Awful, but she is awesome. She plays more than one role in the episode, and I loved it. I have seen her on Schitt's Creek before, and again, this episode is very meta with that, and it's really good. I really thought she did a great job, and she's probably the star of the entire season. I think I've read some reviews already that kind of point her out as a high point. Even people that don't necessarily like the season single out her performance as just really great and a little bit over the top, but I like it. It's good over the top. It's not trying too hard. And also the stars of the last episode titled Demon 79. I've never seen them before in anything, but I thought they were great. That episode is really weird. And again, I'm going to talk about that in spoilers, but it's really just them two throughout that episode. There are some supporting characters that they have a few lines with here and there, but it's a lot of just them two in a room together. And I dug it. Their chemistry is really kind of quirky and weird. And it's kind of the demon and the angel on your shoulder at the same time. Definitely more demon, but speaks like an angel, if that makes sense. So it's cool. I really like it, and I thought that both of the stars of that episode were really good. I found out the episode was directed by the same person that did Miss Marvel for the MCU. I thought that was really interesting because I like that series a lot. It's totally different than this episode, but I really liked it. So definitely that episode was a highlight for me. So that will end the non-spoiler section of my review. But before I go to the spoiler section, I will say this season is a good watch. I think you should definitely watch this season if you are a fan of sci-fi. It's not too crazy. Again, there's one episode that will kind of stay with you a little bit. And it's kind of but the other episodes I think make you think more than kind of scare you or kind of make you feel like depressed or anything like that. I think that all in all, it's a great season, and I wouldn't watch it with your kids, but I think it's a great season and you should definitely watch it. But now I will go into the spoiler section. So if you don't want to hear spoilers, definitely jump ahead right now. So for spoilers, I'm actually going to go episode by episode and just do a little brief blurb about each. So for the first one, Joan is Awful. My favorite episode, bar none. I really liked the episode. The reason I liked it so much, not just because of the performances, but because I love the twist. You know, of course, Black Mirror, it's all about the twist. It's all about like how it makes you think. And I love the twists that you really don't see coming. Like, these are hard to do because you come into Black Mirror expecting it. So to be able to still pull something off and to not get the audience to really see it coming, I thought was great. So the basic story is that this woman, Joan, all of a sudden sees her life, like the day that she just had, on TV as a new series on a service called Streamberry, which is obviously Netflix. The whole country gets tuned in to the series. And of course, like everybody she knows is also watching it. And her boyfriend watches her go to the therapist and talk about how she doesn't really like him and that he's bland. And then she wishes she was with her old boyfriend. And then it shows how she fired a coworker. The way they show it is a little more dramatized than her actual life, of course. And it's a little more callous. And of course, Salma Hayek plays her on the show. So she's playing it up too. And I love Salma Hayek in this episode. Michael Cera is also great in this episode, even though it was only in a few minutes, but his few minutes are really gold, I think. And then eventually Joan like loses her job, loses everything. So she tries to sue the company that's following her and learns that when she signed up just to watch the service, she also signed up for them to use her likeness through like basically Alexa, like Alexa learning everything about you. And they equate it to when, you know, you talk about something like some kind of product and then you start getting ads for that product on your phone. Well, this is the next step of that. Basically, they're hearing everything you're saying and they're rebuilding your life based on what you've said and what they've heard on all these different devices, which is really scary. And I'd like to think that that technology is not out there. But guess what? We've got a writer's strike going on right now that talks about these issues specifically. And wow, another way that Black Mirror is great is when they talk about issues that are going on right now. And they must have known that a writer's strike was going to happen because these were filmed a long time ago. I mean, at least the stories were thought up years ago, but we're going through a writer's strike right now where the writers are fighting to have AI removed from the creative process. And here we're getting a prime example of what will happen if they do not do that. This episode is about a series based completely on AI and AI creating content for viewers and how viewers would react to that. So it's really scary, it's really poignant, and it's just Black Mirror at its best. So really, I think if I was going to show someone that was on the fence and never watched a Black Mirror episode before, I would show them this episode. I think this episode is really Black Mirror at its best. And I think already it's in my top 3 Black Mirror episodes of all time. I just really enjoyed it. And again, it really touches on everything that's great about Black Mirror. It's meta, there's a twist, and then there's a different twist. You know, the final twist is that Annie Murphy's character is not the first Joan. She's in the first fictive level, and there's a Joan beneath her, and there's a Joan above her, and the real Joan is doing all these things. And it turns out that Annie Murphy's character doesn't have any control over what's going on, and Annie Murphy is also an actress that's helping out the real Joan, just like the real Salma Hayek is supposed to be helping out the Joan that's Annie Murphy. It's just great. It's just freaking Black Mirror at its best. And I'm just a huge fan of this episode. And like I said, in my top 3 for sure. The next episode is titled Lock Henry. And just like Joan is Awful, it touches on Netflix and what effect they have on not just culture, but the people that are involved in creating content, specifically documentaries and documentaries based around horrible events like serial killings. Netflix got a lot of subscribers after they started airing these documentaries based on serial killers. One in particular that I can't remember right now, but it was the one that went back to court just because of what was found out on the documentary. And this episode, Lock Henry, follows these 2 kids that are going to make a documentary about one thing, and then the girlfriend of the main character learns about this missing couple and these killings that happened at the town where her boyfriend grew up in, and they learn more and learn more and learn more about it. And it turns out that this kid's parents were involved with the killer and staged everything to point it to one guy, and even kept tapes of what happened. And eventually they find out about the parents being involved in it, and the mother commits suicide and gives over all the evidence basically to the son so it can be part of the documentary. It's really chilling, and it really shows you how these documentaries can not only affect the people that watch these, and like, because the end of the episode shows like how popular the town has become, how popular this kid is now. He's winning awards, and he has this great apartment. He's drinking champagne in a tux, but his life is just ruined. You know, his girlfriend died during the making of the documentary. His mother killed herself. He knows that his mother and father were these horrible people and involved in this twisted thing. You know, it's just a crazy look, and again, a very meta look, and shows you what's going on with Netflix and other streaming services, because Netflix is not the only streaming service by any means that has shown these documentaries. But I think anyone would agree that Netflix probably gained the most from showing these, and they probably know a little thing about how it affects the people that take part in these documentaries. I really hope that nothing like this ever happened or anything close to it, but I'm probably wrong, and probably people learned more than they wanted to creating these documentaries. So a really good Black Mirror episode. I wouldn't say it kept me as enthralled as the first episode. It's a much more slow moving story, and I think that you can kind of feel the twist coming at one point in the second act. I think once they talked about how his father got shot, and just something about it made it seem like, oh, wait a minute, the father is responsible for catching this guy. They're involved somehow, and maybe not involved completely, but I kind of saw the twist coming, really way more so than the prior episode for sure. But I think that that's one way that this episode is not as good as the first episode of the sixth season, Joan is Awful. This episode is a lot more slow moving, and you can kind of feel the twist coming before it comes. And I think that the first fictive level twist in Joan is Awful, I think is out of nowhere. I never saw that coming, but maybe you did. Let me know in the comments if you saw the twist coming in that first episode, but I sure didn't. But in this episode, I feel like I did. Maybe not the whole thing. I mean, I didn't get like, maybe not that the mom was as part of it as she ended up being. I thought maybe she was just a willing accomplice. Like, she seems so like frail and fragile that maybe if the husband was like this crazy guy, he beat her down and made it so she was too afraid to say anything. I kind of thought that was coming. So the mom thing was maybe a little bit of a surprise for me, but all in all, it was a more obvious plot line than most Black Mirror episodes. And then the third episode, Beyond the Sea, this is the episode that I thought I was going to like the most and ended up liking the least out of the 5. Because, first of all, I love these space episodes that Black Mirror has done. Anytime they've gone into space or done anything with space, I think they've done a really good job. The Star Trek parody episode is the one that sticks out the most to me. So the fact that this episode looked to be taking place in space, I thought was going to be really cool. Also, Aaron Paul, Josh Hartnett, I really like those actors. Kate Mara is good too. All three of them are excellent in this episode, by the way. Even though I may not really like the episode, I thought that all three of them do a really great performance. It's a really kind of hurry up and wait kind of performance. You have these like long lulls of nothing happening, and then boom, like something crazy happens, and you're like, what is going on? Like, what kind of story is this? And then finally, you get this lull, and then boom, something else crazy happens. And then I think there's another lull, and then the final, crazy thing happens in the end. So this story is set in that 1969 alternate setting that I was talking about earlier, where we are a spacefaring culture, and we also have developed technology where it allows astronauts to take on long distance missions, and then while sleeping, transferring their consciousness to a robot body that kind of interacts with their family. So they're only really conscious on the ship in their actual bodies when they're doing stuff, and when they're just traveling and not really doing anything like fixing or taking a physical or taking readings or anything like that, they're living in a robot body in 1969 on the planet Earth. And then eventually some crazy cult that I think there's some Manson kind of aspect to him. I think they're definitely like trying to do an alternate, Charles Manson, not Marilyn Manson, Charles Manson and his family thing with this storyline. And they end up not only killing the robot of Josh Hartnett's character, but his family as well in a really gruesome way. and they force Josh Hartnett to watch it and then just like send his consciousness back up to space so he can't do anything about it. Like he's there and he can't save his family at all. It's really shocking. And you kind of think like that's going to be the last shocking thing to see, but it's not. And then, so kind of like I said, that hurry up and wait, like, it's like boom, 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 boom. And then like you have that wait, and then something crazy happens. So Josh Hartnett's character obviously goes crazy. They're in year 2 of a 6-year mission. So they can't do anything for this guy. They can't build him another robot for, reasons probably convenient to the plot line. But Josh Hartnett's character can use Aaron Paul's robot character on Earth. So just by using his dog tag, he can slide in figuratively and literally into Aaron Paul's robot's character and interact with his wife and stuff like that. So at first, I think that at first everything is wrong. Like as soon as they mentioned that, I was like, oh yeah, this is going to end up horribly. Like, first of all, you've got this guy that's obviously crazy. How can you not be crazy after seeing your whole family get killed? And then Aaron Paul's character is just like, oh yeah, I'm going to let you walk around in my body and hang out with my family in the middle of nowhere because, I just want to help you out. I just, I kind of took me out of it at that point because I knew something really bad was going to happen again. I pretty much guessed actually what happened. I wasn't sure if they were going to shy away from it, and they kind of did by not showing exactly what happens, but it's definitely inferred. But what ends up happening is Josh Hartnett's character, as Aaron Paul falls in love or has feelings towards Kate Mara, Aaron Paul's wife, and makes a move, and then she rejects him, and then Aaron Paul says, this really weird kind of thing where Aaron Paul's character is like, I'm not going to let you touch my wife, but yeah, you could use my body and finish a painting. Like, what? Like, again, it kind of took me out of it. This is why this episode really doesn't do it for me. And then the episode ends with, after Josh Hartnett's character is told off by Aaron Paul's character, he figures out a way for Aaron Paul to be outside of the space station while he steals his dog tag, uses his body one more time, and kills Aaron Paul's family, basically to put Aaron Paul in the same state that Josh Hartnett's character is in. They're both trapped in the spaceship for at least 3 years. I doubt they make it 3 years. I'm sure they go at it before that. But that's how the episode ends, with them together. Black Mirror always has a shocking episode where the end kind of sticks with you a little bit. And I think this episode was designed to do that. But I don't know. It wasn't one of my favorite Black Mirror episodes. The choices made by the characters didn't make a lot of sense to me, and it took me out of the story multiple times, and I saw the twist coming, so not really what Black Mirror is meant for, in my opinion. The 4th episode of the season is titled Maisie Day, and it follows 2 characters, kind of. One who is like a member of the paparazzi and is, the real gross paparazzi that tries to do like upskirt stuff and all that stupid stuff. And she's trying to get pictures of different people. She ends up taking pictures of this one guy who is engaged in a gay encounter with another man, and it ruins his career and his family, and he ends up committing suicide, and she goes through an existential crisis. Because of this, this episode, all in all, I liked, but the first 2 acts I was like checked out on, honestly. Not just because I wasn't a huge fan of the last episode, but I really am not a fan of celebrity culture. I hate it. I hate the fact that, like people care about what people are eating, what people are dressing, what people are doing. Like, I think celebrities should just be on screen in their roles, and nobody should give a crap what they do. Yeah, if they're like pedophiles or if they're hurting people, yeah, I want to know about that, and they should be like punished to the extent of the law, and nobody should get away with anything. But I don't want to know who they're hooking up with or, all that stupid stuff. So really, the first 2 acts of this episode kind of play out like that. We're not just following the photographer. All of a sudden, we're also following the star of this English program who does mushrooms and thinks she hits something. The audience is made to think she hits a man, but it turns out that she didn't just hit a man. She hit a very special kind of man who is a werewolf. And in the 3rd act, the whole story goes crazy with the reveal that this star, Maisie Day, is not in rehab, and she's not suffering like post-traumatic stress from hitting a person while being intoxicated and doing a hit and run. Basically, she hit a werewolf. Like, when she hit somebody, she didn't initially run away. She went over to check on who she hit, and it turned out it wasn't a man, it was a werewolf. She got bit by the werewolf and then turned into one, and they had her chained up at this facility so that she could kind of go through the change and not hurt anybody. Well, the paparazzi show up and they think that she's there because she's detoxing, and they try to, unhook her, and she kills everybody but one of them, basically. And then the episode ends with her killing herself and the photographer getting a picture of that. And that's kind of how the technology ties back in. So I really loved the werewolf reveal. I loved how the episode changed very quickly. I just loved the third act. It's just the first two acts. I think I was even like playing a video game on mute. Like I was that tuned out of the episode, just because the things that, she was going through, and both characters, like, I really don't care. Like celebrities, I understand, are people. They're going to have drug addictions. And if they're trying to get help, they should be able to get help. They shouldn't have to worry about people chasing them down. And when I see stuff like that, it just kind of like almost makes me angry that we live in a culture where people have to deal with stuff like that. And people say, oh, you sign up for that. You do not. Like, your brain is broken if you think that. Like, just because you sign up to be an actor doesn't mean like you have to worry about, like where you go out to eat, just because somebody's going to take a picture of like you and say like, oh, this is what so-and-so looks like without makeup on. It's just dumb. And it really, I think, creates a bad culture. But again, I'm going to get off my soapbox and just say like, that's kind of why I was tuned out of the first two acts. But once we find out that, whoa, she's a werewolf, I was like, yes, like this is exactly like what I want to see. And again, I love the twists of Black Mirror, and they got me in this one because I never in a million years would have thought that it was a werewolf. But the fact that she was in like a small European town, like everything kind of, after the fact kind of added up, and I really liked that. So in the end, I did like this episode, but I would just say that, the first two acts were kind of boring for me, but I love the end, and I thought the performances were really good as well. And then finally, we have the Red Mirror Presents episode of Demon 79, which is the really, I think, horror-themed episode. This episode had nothing to do with technology. It was set in 1979. I didn't notice anything different from the actual 1979. What happens is a woman working in, I think, Great Britain at a shoe store gets cut, and the blood gets on a talisman. And it's kind of a twist on the old monkey paw storyline where, somebody gets a monkey paw or a paw, some kind of hand that's got like 3 fingers. And every time they make a wish, like a finger goes down. Well, in this case, the person is bound to this talisman, and a demon is like helping her out. But the demon comes in the form of like this like 1970s style musician that's really flamboyant and stuff. And I thought he was really cool. I already discussed that one of the standouts for this episode were the chemistry between the two stars. And I just really liked them together. It was a really odd pairing, I think. And even their relationship at times, you thought they were on the same page. And then at other times, it's like, no, they're not at all. Like, she does not understand what's going on, or he does not understand her, or what's going on. But I really liked that. I really liked their chemistry. I love the way it was shot. It was very Grindhouse style. And I thought it was really cool. It was a really good change up from the rest of the Black Mirror episodes. And the fact that it had nothing to do with technology really didn't bother me at all. And I thought the ending was really good too. So back to the plot of the story, the main character is tasked with killing 3 people over 3 days. And every time she kills somebody, one of the lines, there's 3 lines on this talisman, one of the lines gets taken away. So she initially thinks she knows what she has to do. And then she finds out after killing one person that didn't count because they themselves were a killer, and you can't kill somebody who is a killer. It doesn't count for whatever rules of what's going on in this episode. And she's unable to kill 3 people that fit the criteria before the 3 days come up. And she witnesses, the end of the world. Not just that, but the demon that was helping her is now banished to oblivion and agrees to take her with. So I thought that was a really cute ending. I thought it was really good. The whole episode is really quirky and really, again, subverts your expectations about what's going to happen. And I thought it was great. I think this, besides the first episode, this was my second favorite episode of the season. I'd still put it at least in my top 10 of all Black Mirror episodes. I really liked it. I really liked that they leaned into the horror more than the technology. And I thought it was a great episode. But let me know, what did you think of the 6th season of Black Mirror? Will you be recommending it to friends? Are you going to keep watching it if it comes out? Or do you think it has lost its luster? I know there were a few reviews that said, they just spent too long between the last season to this one and people just don't care about it anymore. I don't think that's true, especially in the age of streaming. I still watch things that were released 5, 10, 15 years ago just because of streaming. So I don't necessarily think that's true. I really thought this was a good season. I probably actually liked it more than the last season, if I'm being completely honest. So I like the season. But let me know, what did you think of the season of Black Mirror? So now let's talk about the new Flash film that was just released. Just like I did with my Black Mirror review breakdown / whatever, I'm going to do a non-spoiler breakdown of the Flash first, and then we'll do a spoiler review and warn you before I get into that so you can jump around if you haven't seen it yet. The first thing that I will say about the Flash film is that it was really a fun superhero movie with a lot of heart. I think you have to curb your expectations with these movies. You're not going to get Citizen Kane, obviously, but this isn't the worst kind of movie either. You just have to kind of understand that there's going to be certain tropes and certain things you're going to see, and it's going to be a lot of CGI, and there's going to be a lot of member berries and things of that nature. But all in all, with the plot the way it is, I liked it. I thought it was good. I went with my partner, and she ugly cried through a good portion of the third act, and she does not give a crap about these movies. She would never go out and see a superhero movie, but she'll watch it if it's on, and if it's on, she can get into it and enjoy it. And she liked the movie. She thought it was really good. So somebody who doesn't like superhero movies at all really liked it. Somebody like me that really likes superhero movies liked it as well. It was great to see Michael Keaton back as Batman. They did some cool member berries for him too. The fact that he was so old as Batman, he's all covered up. Everything is CGI. Just don't care. I don't really, just seeing him, and there's kind of different versions of him you see throughout the movie. I really liked it. I thought that he did a great job. The note that I have about him, it was like he never left the role or did more than just 2 movies over 25 years ago. It's really hard to conceptualize the small part of Batman's history that Michael Keaton occupies when everybody thinks about Michael Keaton as Batman. It's really crazy to think about the impact that he's had as the character. And I think that holds true in this movie. And it was great to see him. He did a great job interacting with Ezra Miller. I really liked their chemistry, and I bought it too. I really liked kind of the roles that they played. Speaking of Ezra Miller, I think they did a good job too. One of the difficult things I think for them was really there were 2 distinct characters of Barry Allen, one from 2023 and one from 2013. It really was kind of a metaphor for the plot line of the movie that when you change the past, you don't just change from that moment on, you change what happened before it as well, and even certain things that you may think don't connect to it. And that character was like that. The younger version of Barry, whatever you want to call him, he was different, not just because he was younger, but his life experience was different, which made him a much different character. And that's really, if you think about it, the theme for the entire movie, that when you change the past, you don't just start anew from that moment on. It changes things from the past as well. So just like this character of Barry, he wasn't just different from the older Barry from 2013 on, he was different from before 2013 as well. And it made them so much different. I think that Ezra Miller did a really good job creating those 2 distinct characters. And I really bought it. I thought that was one of my favorite parts of this movie. Another character I really liked was Sasha Calle as Supergirl. I hope I'm saying her name right. I thought she looked awesome. She doesn't have a whole lot of lines. I don't think that's really a spoiler. I would have liked some more lines with her, but I know that there were a lot of characters that they had to fit in I think 2.5 hours or however long it was. When she was on screen, she was definitely like a bright spot. Not just the way she looked. I mean, her suit was super bright. One of the concerns with the original Zack Snyder movies was a lot of the muted colors. Some of the colors didn't look as bright as they did in the comics. And man, when she's on screen, her suit is super bright. They really don't shy away from her differences than Kal-El. She's more aggressive. They really leaned into that. And I really liked her performance. And as a comic book fan, I really liked the changes they made to the Flashpoint storyline and the Red Sun comic book storyline. If you're familiar with those, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And you probably are familiar with them since they're 2 of the most popular storylines in comics. I will say that there is a part of the movie that I believe, I know, touches on the Crisis on Infinite Earths plotline. I don't think they did that very well. It's kind of out of nowhere It almost is kind of looks like fan service to me because they don't really go into what's happening at that point. And unfortunately, I can't get into any more without going into spoilers, but there is a scene where they touch on the Crisis on Infinite Earths plotline. And I don't know if I think it was too much. I think that there may have been plans for this plotline in future movies, and they're not going to do that because now different people own DC and are in charge. But I think that that may have been what happened. It was just thrown in, and they're like, well, this is cool. We're not going to take it out, even though we don't really touch on it. And we kind of just have a throwaway line about what's going on. I also know that they did something similar in Marvel recently, and maybe they didn't want to be too much like Marvel and why they shied away from this. I really like how they changed up Flashpoint and Red Sun because knowing those comic books, I hate knowing what's going to happen on screen as well. And I'm not one of those people that are like, oh, you have to stick to print. You have to do exactly what they said in the comic books or you're bastardizing. No, I would rather there be some kind of change or twist or something so I'm not seeing exactly what I know is coming. And I think in both cases, they did that with Flashpoint and Red Sun. They definitely take liberty with those storylines in this movie. And I like it. I like what they did with both of them. So again, all in all, a good movie. I know that before it was coming out, people were saying it's the best comic book movie ever. It's not. I don't think it's the best comic book movie ever. It's not better than like the first Superman. It's not better than The Dark Knight. You know, obviously those are two completely different movies, and The Flash is actually probably somewhere in the middle, probably more so towards Superman. But I thought it was a good movie. It's definitely worth seeing at the theaters. If you're on the fence about it, I would say jump over to the fence of seeing it. And, you know, I think it's fun. I think it's worth it. It's not too long. Just, you know, you worry about all those characters and stuff if it's going to be too long and too crazy. I don't think the plot line gets convoluted. I don't think there's too many characters. I think it's just right. You know, you could tell that many people worked on it, but it's not, you know, just a mishmash of different ideas like the first run of Justice League was. I think that it's very cohesive in that way, and it's definitely worth a watch. So if you're wondering what to do, I would see The Flash. If you have seen The Flash, here's my spoiler review. So if you have not seen it, definitely click ahead now. The first thing I want to say, and this is really the thing that I like the most about this movie, is that I thought it was a great, inventive way to tell an origin story. You know, in a lot of ways, this movie is the end for The Flash. We see a lot of things ending. I'm going to talk about the ending specifically here in a little bit, but really we see the intro to The Flash as well, with him being able to jump back and showing how, you know, he got his powers and helping the Barry of that timeline get his powers. I thought that that was really smart. We didn't get a intro to The Flash when he appeared in the Justice League all those years ago. And we also didn't know what he was doing during the movie The Man of Steel. So we kind of got those dots filled in with this movie. And it's a really smart way to do that, with this being the end for The Flash, more or less. And the fact that we also got an origin story, it's really smart. I know the Avengers tried to do something like this, but with the Avengers, you already had their origin stories already. So even though they changed them in future movies when they went back in time and, you know, had to get the Infinity Stones and stuff, we still saw the original Avengers movie. So we kind of had that perspective. In this case, we didn't see the Flash in this universe get their powers and that scene, even though if we've seen any of the series that the Flash had or any of their comic books, we know that that's exactly how the Flash got his powers in those stories. It was still cool to see on screen, and it was cool that they did an origin story in a movie that was basically about this character's ending. I also will say that I like the surprise cameos. Most of these cameos were spoiled before the movie came out because it was filmed so long ago. Because I think, especially a couple of times, I would have liked to have been surprised where I wasn't. One cameo in particular, the Nicolas Cage cameo, I think was shocking to me because I don't think a lot of people will get that. You know, Nicolas Cage appears in this movie in a scene when they're looking at all the different Superman in the different universes, or maybe just all the different comic book characters in the different universes. And then we see Nicolas Cage fighting a huge spider. A lot of people might not know that there was a Tim Burton version of a Superman movie called Superman Lives that went into pre-production, and there were pictures of Nicolas Cage basically looking like he did in the movie as Superman, and that movie also had a third act where he fought a giant spider, just like he did in this movie. So I know that because I'm a huge comic book nerd, but I don't think a lot of people know that. I know that the person that I was with did not know that Nicolas Cage had a chance to be Superman at any time. So I was kind of shocked that they didn't use another cameo for that scene or just cut it out altogether. It was cool to see Nicolas Cage as Superman. That's the closest we'll ever get to see, I guess. But I don't know. I thought that of all the cameos, that was the head scratcher for me. It was really cool to, hear Jack Nicholson's voice, Cesar Romero, Adam West, to see Christopher Reeve and, Superman and Supergirl together. They didn't really touch on many of the TV shows. I know there's been a lot of them, but I think the only TV show that they touched on was the Adam West Batman show. Some people are saying that one of the Flashes from the Flash TV series was in one of the scenes, but I think the actor stated that it wasn't him. So if that character was in there, it was just his likeness, and that he doesn't think that he sold his likeness. But the other cameos I liked. I thought that, I already talked about, I guess Michael Keaton's not really a cameo, but some of the Justice League cameos were cool. I knew about Ben Affleck, of course, but I didn't know for sure that Wonder Woman was going to show up. So, her little scene I thought was cool, and also touched on Justice League and some of her interactions with the character. But one character that I didn't really find, I thought that the end credit scene was kind of stupid. The thing I hate the most is when you have to stay around for an end credit scene, and then you watch it and you're like, oh my God, why did I stay around and watch this stupid scene? And I kind of think we get that in the end credit scene with this movie, him showing up with Jason Momoa. I was surprised that Jason Momoa was absent from this movie. I think there was a CGI rendering of him at one point, but for the most part, he's not in the film. He still has another movie. There's going to be another Aquaman movie coming out at some point this year, I think in the fall. So the fact that he was just in that one end credit scene, I thought was pretty dumb. He was in the Peacemaker series for a second, and I liked his scenes with the Flash in that more than I did in this movie, which was weird. Speaking of the endings, I learned after watching the movie that there were actually 3 endings to this film. We see George Clooney show up as Batman, and it's obvious that whatever Barry went back to do, he did not change everything to be what it was before he left. Of course, we know that he made it so his dad could get released from prison. So that was one change that he did. And somehow that also affected the past. And we get a cameo from George Clooney as now the Batman of whatever universe he is in. That cameo was actually filmed in January of 2023 and was the 3rd ending that was filmed. The first ending that was filmed and was filmed originally when the filming was done, the first ending that was filmed showed Barry leaving the courthouse just like he did in the ending that we saw, but Michael Keaton would show up as Bruce Wayne and Supergirl would show up too, and that obviously they would both be alive. I don't know if this means that he didn't defeat Zod, because we never really got a resolution to that plot line. They just said that they couldn't save both Michael Keaton as Bruce Wayne and Supergirl, so they just kind of abandoned them. But in this ending, I guess we would see that they somehow survived, and maybe they did defeat Zod together. That was scrapped, and then it was changed so that Henry Cavill and Gal Gadot would return as their characters, Superman and Wonder Woman, respectively. But at that point, it was assumed that Henry Cavill was returning as Superman, and that was also at the time that he shot a cameo for Black Adam. But of course, when James Gunn and Peter Safran took over, they decided to recast Superman and cancel the next Wonder Woman movie. So they decided not to go with either ending that they had been filmed, and then film this new one in January of 2023 with George Clooney. So I don't know. I was like, whatever with George Clooney showing up. I was like, yeah, it kind of makes sense. If you're wondering about Robert Pattinson as Batman, he's in a different multiverse. So they talked about the multiverse in this movie. Where he lives is completely different than anything that we saw in this movie. And I don't even think they referenced that multiverse when we saw all the multiverses in that Crisis on Infinite Earth scene that I kind of touched on earlier. So we are still getting a Penguin show on Max soon, and they're still doing a sequel to the Batman movie. But I think as far as we're concerned, except for the Aquaman movie, they're not going to touch on the characters in this movie anymore, which I'm like, whatever. I mean, Supergirl was killed. Barry is in a different universe, so it kind of tidies up things kind of nicely. And Michael Keaton got to go out like a boss as Batman. So if this is the way it ends, I think it's a good ending. It definitely ended better than it started, and they should be proud of that. But let me know, what did you think of this movie? Did you see The Flash? Were you surprised by anything? Were you surprised by the cameos? Was it better than you thought it was? Was it worse than you thought it was? Are you not going to see it because you're protesting any of the things that have gone on behind the scenes? Let me know in the comments below. And then before I get to the channel update that I promised you, I do want to touch on a couple of other things that were released last week. You know, if you follow this channel, that I am a fan of Rebel Moon, and the promotion for that movie has really started to kick in. I really think that it's because the Flash movie was just released, and maybe there's nothing big that people are looking forward to. So they decided to now kick it into full gear for Rebel Moon, so people will start to learn about that and not be worried about other things. They released a behind the scenes video which showed a lot. They also talked about the story. One of the lines was that the story is about few versus the many, impossible odds, and good versus evil. It emphasized the large scale of the project, which I kind of touched on in my podcast last week. Multiple actors discussed how much bigger this project was than other big movies that they have worked on. And we're talking about actors that have worked on like multi-million dollar, summer blockbusters. There were also a lot of practical effects. So we saw, green screen stuff as well, but we saw real tangible stuff that had been built and these huge like cities that were kind of like displayed on screen. It was really cool. Zack Snyder, the director of the film, also stated that the movie for him existed elementally for 20 years. I thought that was really cool, that this is something that he's thought about for 20 years and that he, now gets to make, and he's definitely putting everything into it. I mean, this just looks like an amazing film, and it looks like they're going to put a lot of money into it too. Speaking of the main cast, more than one of them talked about how they had to train for 2 months before filming started. Again, emphasizing the scale and how crazy and huge this film is going to be. At the end of the behind the scenes video, there was a short 30-second clip that just showed like these ships landing in this small village. Even the ships kind of seem new to me. It's really hard, I think, in sci-fi to create something that you're not automatically like, oh, that reminds me of Star Trek, or oh, that reminds me of Star Wars. And really, the way the ships were depicted, the engines and how they landed and stuff, it really seemed new to me. It didn't automatically seem like something else. And I thought it was cool. Everything I see about this movie really gets me excited for it. To me, what I saw, it kind of looks like Game of Thrones meets Dune. I know that kind of contradicts what I just said, where, nothing seemed like another franchise to me. But if I had to kind of classify it to someone that knew nothing about Rebel Moon, I would say it kind of looks like the aesthetic of Game of Thrones meeting the aesthetic of Dune. That kind of sci-fi, maybe barbarian like kind of thing. It definitely kind of screams that to me. This film will release on Netflix on December 22nd. And they also released a first poster. Again, everything I see makes me more excited about this movie, and this video is no different. I suggest you do check out that video after you check out this podcast. It's only a few minutes long, and it's definitely worth it, and it should get you excited about this movie. So let me know, have you gotten excited about Rebel Moon yet? Are you tired of hearing me talk about it? If you are, I'm sorry, but I'm still going to keep talking about it up until its release on December 22nd, and afterwards as well, because I just think it's going to be awesome. I'm a big fan of Zack Snyder and a lot of people involved in it. So let me know, are you psyched for Rebel Moon, and will you be watching it when it comes out on Netflix? Then next, I want to talk about something else that I have brought up before, and that is Starfield, which is a video game. It's a huge open world video game that is being released by Bethesda, who are the same people that did like Skyrim and the latter part of the Fallout series. So what we saw was a couple of things. There was a 3-minute trailer release, but also a 40-plus minute presentation at the Starfield Direct conference following the Xbox Games Showcase was released on YouTube. And the game to me just looks beautiful and huge. During the presentation, they stated that over 1,000 unique planets would be created and that characters would be able to explore them. These planets would be created for specific stories, but they also had this AI generation system that can create planets on the fly when someone is in the area, which I think is really cool. And like I said, they're all unique. This game will release on September 6th of 2023 and is 25 years in the making. You can imagine a game that is this big and this huge. Took a long time and probably took some time for technology to catch up with a lot of the ideas that these game developers had. The presentation also showed there will be fully customizable characters, bases, which are basically houses if you are familiar with MMORPGs, as well as ships. And they're customizable to the component level, which I thought was pretty cool. And they also stated that you can either purchase or steal the ships. Like you can be a pirate and show up on the side of the ship and just like kind of attack it. I thought that was pretty cool. I don't remember a game where you're able to do that. So it's another way that I am psyched for this game. They're also introducing crew members. So if you played like Fallout 4, during the game, you come across characters. They're not just NPCs, but they kind of can follow you and can lead you into quests and help you with just random quests and stuff like that. And it looks like that's going to be available in this game as well. And you can do more things with these crew members. They'll have specific things that they can help you with and things like that. So it really looks cool. There are also things in the trailer about searching for ancient artifacts and also like players having like levitating powers and stuff like that. So there may be things about this game that we don't even know yet. Also, the battle kind of looked to me like Fallout 4, which I liked a lot. There's no VAT system if you're familiar with that game, but kind of like the targeting and how they put everything on the user interface. It looked a lot like Fallout 4 to me. Of course, this is the company that created Fallout 4, so that makes a lot of sense. If you don't want to watch the 40-minute presentation, I can understand, but you should kind of check out the 3-minute trailer. I think if you're a fan of sci-fi and a fan of Star Trek, watching the 3-minute trailer will get you psyched for this game, and I'll put a link to that trailer in the description below. But let me know, what do you think about Starfield? Do you know nothing about it besides what I have said on my channel? I think this is the third or fourth time I've talked about it. I am a big fan of the concept as well as the game developer. So I'm a huge fan already of this. I can't wait for it to come out. I've been waiting for it for a while now, it seems. But I'm definitely going to be playing it and perhaps playing it on this channel. But let me know, are you psyched for Starfield? And will you be playing it once it comes out? And then 2 more quick bits of news. Superman and Lois, another show I really like, was renewed for a 4th season. It's only been renewed for a 10-episode season, 3 less than season 3. I'm a huge fan of this series. It does dip into some sci-fi stuff, but I think it's just a good series. Like, this season deals a lot with one of the main characters having cancer, and it's really very real how the family deals with that. So to me, this is just like a family ties good series that has superheroes in it, you know? And the guy who plays Superman and the woman who plays Lois Lane really do a really good job. So if you're looking for a new series to watch, I think this is a good one. And they were really close to getting canceled. They're on a streaming service right now, CW, that is not really going forward with any material like this. They canceled most of their stuff, and Superman and Lois are one of the only series to survive that. So I'm glad that they will get another season. They might not get another one after that. They are only getting 10 episodes, but if the episodes are done well, I'm fine with that. But besides the losing episodes, we're also losing a lot of the cast. So if you watch the series, most of the characters that are not Kents will be leaving. So basically the whole cast that's from Smallville will not be on the show anymore. That leads me to believe that they're probably taking the family from Smallville to Metropolis. If you watch the whole series, the series began with them moving from Metropolis and going to Smallville. Well, now with them losing all these characters and actors, they'll probably just be moving from Smallville back to Metropolis, where they can, you know, create a couple of new characters. One new character that is joining will be Lex Luthor. He is going to show up this season, and he's going to be played by Michael Cudlitz, I think is his last name. Now, it's weird. There is a Walking Dead connection there because Chad Coleman, who's also in the Orville, was also in The Walking Dead, and he is the villain this season on Superman and Lois, a character named Bruno Mannheim. So it's kind of funny that they got actors who I think appeared together on The Walking Dead to play on this series as well. But again, I'm a big fan of this series. I'm glad that we will be getting another season, and I hope that they will keep making this, and maybe it'll transfer to Max or something, and they'll keep making episodes over there. But again, let me know, have you watched Superman and Lois yet? I know that that's a series I've talked about before on this channel, but let me know if you are a fan or if Superman stuff is just not for you. And then my last news story is that Linda Hamilton has joined the final season of Stranger Things. Now, I know that I don't talk about Stranger Things that much on this channel. It's kind of more fantasy than sci-fi, but I think it's cool that Linda Hamilton is joining this cast. She recently appeared on Resident Alien, which is like a comedy sci-fi show that's really good. If you haven't watched Resident Alien, that's another good show to watch. But Stranger Things is good at like this nostalgia casting of casting actors that were popular in like the 80s and 90s. They've already cast Carrie Elways, Matthew Modine, Paul Reiser, and Sean Astin in different roles. So getting Linda Hamilton makes a lot of sense. The only thing is these characters usually die, but this is the last season of Stranger Things, so I guess it doesn't really matter if anyone survives. In an interview, Linda Hamilton did state that she was a fan of the series. I'm always a fan when a fan gets cast in a series, and Linda Hamilton is great at that. I wonder if she's going to play like another military badass or just a total diversion from the characters that we're used to seeing her play. But this is one of those series that is already on hiatus due to the writer's strike, and they were one of the early ones to go. So we don't know when we're going to see this season, just like all the other stuff that's on strike right now. And I think it's next week or very soon that the actors go on strike. So that's not great news, but it is cool that once Stranger Things does come around, we will see Linda Hamilton on the screen. So let me know, are you also a fan of Stranger Things? And are you looking forward to seeing Linda Hamilton on the final season whenever it is released? And then this last thing that I'm going to talk about is something that I never really wanted to do. I don't really like making these videos or doing these kind of things on videos, but just like everybody says, I'm going to do it anyway. So the change that I'm going to be doing for this channel, and that you will notice if you have watched my channel for a while, is that I'm going to no longer be creating Easter egg videos in their current format. So if you do watch my channel, you know that basically for every Star Trek episode that comes out and various movies that come out, I will do like an Easter egg breakdown of the movie right afterwards, or, within 24 to 48 hours. Star Trek specifically, whenever those episodes come out, usually they come out on Thursday mornings for me, and I will do a breakdown video that releases at some point on Friday. When I release these videos, I often have problems, and recently it's come to a point where every single video I create for an Easter egg breakdown with, Star Trek content, I get a copyright issue on. And it's not necessarily a strike, but it's something that prevents me from earning revenue on the video. Now, all of these I have been able to beat. So what happens is I'll release the video, and routinely within 24 hours, I'll get a notification from YouTube saying CBS has claimed some of your content and you can't monetize this video. So then I have to do an appeal, which is just this process where I fill out this form and I send it into YouTube, and supposedly someone at CBS reads it and decides to whether approve my video or not. Now you may say like, oh, that doesn't seem like a big deal. The reason this is a big deal and the reason this is stupid and I shouldn't have to do this is, as I stated, every time I get the strike or whatever they call it removed. So I have to go through this for no reason every time. Outside of that, when the strike is removed, I don't automatically earn the revenue that I should have earned on that video. To put it in context for you, there are 2 videos that I created for the last season of Picard that I still have not received revenue for just because of this process. So while this is not my main job, I do depend on this revenue when I see a view count and I'm like, oh, like I know that this is a good video and this is worth my time, and I still have not seen the money for it. So it's difficult to do when I do other videos that I don't have this problem with. If you watch my channel at all, you could probably tell that I basically do 3 types of videos. These Easter egg videos that I'm talking about, podcasts that I'm doing right now, and I will do specific news breakdowns when something happens outside of the bounds of the podcast. Like if I've just released the podcast and something crazy has come out, I'll release another video just to kind of touch on that, because I know in a week nobody's going to care about it. So I've been doing quite a few of these Easter egg videos, and I've been doing them since day one. And almost since day one, Paramount is the only company that I have a problem with. And if I can be so bold, I should say that Paramount should not be working against me. They should almost be working with me on this, because for one, I'm predominantly positive about what I say. Usually, if I have something negative about something, I won't say it. So there have been some things that I just won't make videos about that I know that I'm just not going to like. Now, to say that I don't think I'm a hack, like I don't just like, I'm not one of these Star Trek channels that just falls over with whatever Star Trek does, like, oh, it's a unicorn no matter what kind of nugget, whatever they do, I'm for. Like, I am definitely not that guy. And if you've watched any of my videos about Star Trek, you know that. But it is stressful and it is a lot of work to create these videos. It takes me a long time. If I make an 11-minute video, that could take me as 10 hours to make when I'm making these Easter egg breakdown videos. That's watching the episode more than once. That's doing the script. That's doing the research. That's cutting the, audio for the video. That's looking for the video clips. That's editing the video clips. That's rendering the video. That's uploading the YouTube, and then to go through all that and to get a copyright strike and oh, I gotta maybe cut this scene out or maybe do this, and then oh, the copyright strike is still there. Oh, well, the copyright strike doesn't matter because we're gonna lift it in 8 weeks, and then you're gonna get money. And I don't want to go off on a rant here, but you can kind of feel my frustration and how hard it is for me to create these certain types of videos when I don't have this issue doing podcasts and I don't have this issue during other things. So what I have decided is from now on, I will incorporate my Easter egg notes into my reviews. So like with this podcast, you saw I started with a review of the first episode. Going forward, I will not be releasing an Easter egg video after the release of the episode. I will do a review, and then at the end of my review, I will go over the Easter eggs that I saw. Kind of like how when I actually watch the episodes, I take notes down about what stuff is. I will just kind of read out those notes and do research on those before I do my podcast review. But I'm wondering if doing the Easter eggs and reviews on Mondays, if that's too long. The episode releases on Thursday. If by Monday, if people don't care. So this is another time where you, the viewer, can actually help me. Let me know in the comments, when should I do my review / Easter egg video? Should I do it on Friday? Should I do it separate from my podcast? So basically it would be in this exact type of format, but it would be released on Fridays. And then on Mondays on my podcast, I wouldn't talk about the episode as much as I do now. And I would just talk about the other things I talk about. Would you rather see that? Or do you like hearing my reviews at the beginning of the podcast and you don't mind waiting to Monday to hear them? You'd rather just see it all in one bunch like I do it now. That would really help me out. If you can just let me know in the comments and say I'd rather see your reviews on Friday, or I'd rather see your reviews on Monday, or just, I'd rather see them on the podcast. Let me know. That would really help me out, because right now I think what I'm going to do, like I said, is I'm just going to incorporate the Easter egg stuff into my reviews. I'll just make it like a new section at the end, and I'm not going to be able to cut all the video like I do now, because guys, it's just too much work for basically no reward. I mean, a lot of these videos that take me 10, 11 hours, I'll make $10 on. And that's just stupid. I mean, just hearing that, you should, understand my kind of plight here. But sorry to kind of end the video on a sour note, but, especially doing these podcasts, I feel a greater connection to the people watching my videos. And I really appreciate your support. So I want to be honest with you. I don't want to just do something and not include you in my decision, and then all of a sudden be like, hey, where's the Easter egg videos on Fridays that I'm used to? What's going on? Why'd he stop doing it? Now, if you're a real fan of the channel, and also know that I very much appreciate your support, and I hope that you will continue to support me in the future. But let me know what you think about this announcement. Do you feel my pain? Do you think I'm just crying for no reason? I can tell you, like I said, this is not my real job. I have a 9-to-5, just like you probably do. So picture, tacking 30 to 60 hours of video editing and script work on top of that, and make 10 to 20 bucks for doing it. Think about how you'd feel about that, and then maybe answer my question. But yeah, what do you think I should do? Do you think I should keep with this plan, or do you think that I should go back to making the old videos because they're worth it? Let me know in the comments below. Wow, okay, that was definitely my longest podcast ever. I really appreciate it if you're still listening. Thank you very much for your support. Again, the best way to support me is to hit that like button and to be subscribed for future videos. Leave me a comment as well. Let me know if you have any opinion on any of the topics I talked about. I really appreciate you tuning in, and I will see you next time on What Did I Miss?